Hello, my friends and associates. As promised, I give my 2 cents worth on the new movie Solo. I was slightly disappointed to find out that it was only a handful of people in the theater at the time, and yet not totally surprised. I went into this movie with the concept that having seen a lot of the social negative commentary going on YouTube, and read a lot of material on a lot of people for a lot of motivations that not always seem to click. I know there's a lot of bashing of Disney since the Star Wars the news trilogy made its debut, and some of it's quite warranted, frankly. As a child of Star Wars, if you will, I was 11 years old when the original came out. I can remember when I was a teenager standing outside the only movie theater in the Greater Des Moines area that was showing Empire Strikes Back with my friends for about 12 hours in a line of 1,000 people or better waiting to get in to see the movie. The movie theater itself was in the River Hills Riviera, which was the premier movie theater in Des Moines at the time, and the seating was like 600 people. So we lucked out because the manager decided, because there was still enough people standing around outside hoping beyond hope somehow that there would be another showing, to actually have a late night showing, and we got in around 1 o'clock in the morning. So we stood out, got there at noon, was there till 13 hours before we actually got in to see the movie in the sun, in the warm springtime weather, and the place was packed. I mean, I can remember in the opening sequence of Star Wars when the Star Destroyer rumbled out overhead in Dolby surround sound on that massive curved screen, and you could just feel the huge, immense presence of this thing, feeling like it was rolling over your head. And that was without 3D. Just saying, right? So going into this and only seeing maybe 20 people in a theater designed to hold 150 was kind of disappointing to some degree, but not totally unexpected. I mean, look at just locally, there's probably every movie theater in town is now showing it. Like all the Star Wars movies, they not only show it in one, but they show it in multiple theaters in the theater, and at multiple times during the day. So you have quite a selection of opportunities and choices. And yet, when I went and seen the trilogy, number 7 and number 8, I was terribly disappointed and appalled in some aspects, because that Disney had basically took the entire Legends canon, as it's now considered, and thrown it out the window. For the lion's share, they just rolled it up in a ball, threw it in a nearby trash can, chuckled and shrugged, and said, "Oh, but we'll buy our version no matter what, because you love it." And it was given that they were actually shooting for the younger, more modern audience, if you will, and so they took a lot of liberties with changing a lot of base things, that even in very subtle ways, that did not and still does not sit well with the old fan base. Which, from an economic standpoint, Disney screwed up. I mean, they just screwed up royal, because the old fan base, us old Star Wars children from the 70s and 80s, are what floated this entire franchise for so long. And there's nothing wrong with bringing new generations in. Our kids, we took our kids to see them, we introduced them, we want them to become involved, and to some degree some of them do and did, but to 100% try to cater to this new world thing was a mistake. And then they start twisting a lot of this social justice stuff, trying to alter things to bring it into the modern society morals and standards of today. And I am not against that, but making it such an obvious attempt in such a mean way, it's just foolish, terribly foolish, and not so thoughtful. You're not getting some? Huh? You want some milk? Oh, now Daddy's getting it all over the table. There you go. And it just was a terrible thing. So when I saw Rogue One, I was actually very impressed with Rogue One. I had a lot of misgivings because I'd just seen The previous year we've seen number 7, and all I can see in this new trilogy is Disney's ham-fisted way or attempt to wipe out the old guard, if you will. They want to transition from the old fan base to a new fan base, and bluntly doing so by killing off all the old characters, which I have mixed opinions on the death of Han Solo. I honestly did. I understand that Harrison Ford made it a caveat of his appearance in the movie that they did something with his character that made it so he wouldn't have to come back and do yet another movie. He was not happy with it. But Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill, on the other hand, come on, these are characters, these are actors, actresses that at the time, sadly with Princess Leia's or with Carrie Fisher's death, that's changed that. But the fact that these are old school, old hat, original characters that could be continued in the series and in the sidebar series to some degree, if necessary, without any real threat to the financial well-being of a movie. I mean, Hamilton made it clear he enjoys making Star Wars movies. And, Carrie Fisher hadn't done a movie in decades before coming back for this trilogy, for signing up for this new trilogy. And then you've also got, Billy D. Williams, who made it very clear in the handful of interviews he's done since the two trilogy movies installments came out, that he would have been more than happy to come back as an older version of himself for this reason or that reason. I mean, the potential was there, and Disney made their every effort to kill it, which has hurt it. And then the storyline itself, they diverged too much from Lucas's old canon, and it becomes confusing. And terribly confusing. But I guess I'm getting off a sidetrack. We really don't want to go on about that particular stuff. So talking about the one that we do know, that we have seen, I was impressed. I mean, grant you, it's still Disney's diversion from the original canon of Han Solo's youth and his up-and-coming adventures and how he became who he is today, based off of the books that were written. And yet, they did do a better job, I think, than to date than any movie that Disney's had their greasy claws in to bring more of the old canon, the old legend, into the light. And so we see, we don't know how exactly Han learns to speak Kashyyyk as fluently or understand Kashyyyk as fluently as he does, let alone speak it, which is a very difficult thing. We know from the novels that he was basically fostered by a female Wookiee who was the cook of the guy that he more or less was employed by as a child. The chicanery. Now, there was a great difference between how the books portrayed his earliest life and how his life working for the child gangster outfit that he did and what's her name did. But that's okay. And then adding his love interest, that's a different twist. Not saying they were present in the original book series, so it's not out of character. It also shows that he's a dreamer and a idealist at heart who fights against that concept. He fights hard to show this harder and more callous exterior to the outside world, but deep down he is the iconic hero who will be a hero no matter how much he tries, the reluctant hero. He is the hero no matter how much he tries not to be the hero. And he doesn't try too hard not to be the hero. He always seems to come around and do the right thing. This is what makes his character so poignant amongst all the other characters. When I grew up, a lot of people really connected with Luke and his journey and this Jedi magic idea, and yet I connected with Han Solo. I always connected with the character. To me, he was the heart and soul of this sci-fi fantasy world. And to see Harrison Ford treat the character with some disdain in the real world kind of has always sat wrong with me. To see him get killed at the hands of his son in the movies, I had mixed opinions on it, especially since his son is using the name of Luke Skywalker's son, and they're Disney's adamant stance that they'll never see Mara Jade in a Disney movie, which is sad because she has such a colorful character in the novels, and that we never seen Luke and Leia's children and that as portrayed in the novels, which I think there was so much opportunity missed here by them, by Disney. It's not funny. Yet we see in the Solo movie, the guys are the great segue for Han's collage of his brief career in the military, and why he discovered he didn't want to be in the military, and then his slide into the scoundrel's life, so to speak. His motivations had changed some. His sudden love for the Millennium Falcon when he first set eyes on her and then set his fingers on the controls. His introduction to Chewbacca and the kind of worldly Wookiee who was both amused and slightly chagrined by the antics of this young Han Solo. You could just see the character development there, the partnership in its early stages being so natural. And they did a great job of segueing that, where what's her name gives up, I'm sorry, I can't even think of her name, and she gives up the co-pilot seat because she acknowledges that I'm not a co-pilot, I don't know how to fly this, and she just immediately slides right into it. And it's like they were born to be the tag team partnership that develops in the later movies, or the early movies, if you will, a later timeline. And I was impressed by it. I liked the character. I liked the actor, how he portrayed the character. I think he did a really credible job. And enough so that I could see a follow-up being in the distant future. Whether they'll do that, I don't know. But I could see it. And one of the things I enjoyed about it, like I did enjoy in Rogue One gave us a much more true and realistic view of a civil war, of a terrorist organization that the Rebel Alliance truly is, and how dirty they have to fight and go to accomplish their goals. And they're not the high idealists that they're portrayed in the original trilogy. Not that they're not there, and that the ideals are not there, and so on and so forth. It's just that somebody has to do the dirty work, and there's always somebody willing to do that dirty work. And the special forces for the Rebel Alliance are quite capable of doing it. And for those who have played the West End Games version of this particular organization, the source book explains that. I don't know that the writers and creators of Rogue One had an opportunity to delve into that particular source book of the game system, but I would have been surprised if there wasn't somebody there who was familiar with it, because they did a very credible job of emphasizing pretty much everything that the Rebel Commandos are capable of doing and will do for advancing the cause. We are building a future for other people, a future where there's no room for ourselves. There's an iconic line from Firefly, the Serenity movie, where the bad guy tells that to another semi-bad guy as he kills him. The good guy says, there's no room for us in the future. We're building a world where we don't belong, kind of thing. And I'm badly mangling how that Serenity line went, but now, a couple of the obvious issues, and probably a source of a lot of contention right now with the movie, is the portrayal of Lando Calrissian. Now, I always viewed Lando as that not so good friend of Han's from his adventuring days, of his smuggler days, a self-made con artist, gambler, suave, sophisticated ladies' man type who parlayed his charm, his quick thinking and wits into a series of successful endeavors that once he got into those endeavors tended to either bomb or fail, not necessarily because of his inability to manage things or his lack of administrative ability, but because of other outside forces conspiring against him. We see that in The Empire Strikes Back when he loses the Cloud City, basically not because of his inability to manage things, but because the Empire moves in and he's pragmatic enough to understand or see the writing on the wall and to bail when it's important. So we see that in the movie where there's a definite sense of survival trait built into the Lando Calrissian character, where he's not, necessarily going to stick around and risk his own neck unless there's a payoff that really warrants doing so. In the canon of Legends, we know that he led this ragtag pirate force against an Imperial fleet, and again engaging at a particular planet, and I think it's the Battle of Tanab, and he successfully leads them to victory. And there was financial gain and notoriety involved there. Otherwise, he wouldn't have involved himself. He wouldn't have stuck his nose into it. Later, when he gets involved briefly with the Rebel Alliance and becomes a general at the Battle of Endor, well, that's typical of Lando. He wants to get his 2 cents in, get his fame, build up a new network of contacts, so on and so forth, and at the moment, it's all he's got on the plate. So he goes in full bore and gets his too, and gets a lot. He doesn't get the credit that I think the character deserved even back then. He was a secondary NPC, if you will, by all means a supporting actor role, and continues to be so, although having seen it, he had a series of books in the early days, so the character's got enough depth that potentially he could have his own story without too much trouble. I don't care for this innuendo that's been floating around about his so-called pansexuality. The droid was trying to be funny. The droid was trying to mimic human reactions and actions to certain things, girl talk, so to speak, and over-the-top girl talk, so to speak, and how, this idea that, well, you love a toaster. Well, guess what? It's not the context. I don't look at it that way. I don't take it that way. Maybe you don't agree with me, then you're welcome to your particular opinions, and I'll not say one way or another. I think, first off, if you spend enough time with anybody, including a semi-intelligent or an intelligent machine, as a companion, as an associate, you develop rapport with them, you develop an appreciation, a respect, perhaps even some version of love for them, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not twisted or sick or perverted, as some people are trying to make it out to be. That's just total BS right there, total retarded, and I don't buy into it, don't want to buy into it, and frankly will not buy into it. I refuse to buy that. I refuse to drink that cup of Kool-Aid, my friends. Not going to happen. And yet, if you understood the Calrissian character from the old canon, and you have to go way back to the short novelettes that were created in the late 70s, early 80s. There was a trio of them, and there's actually references. Lando makes a couple references when he's talking to impressing these other aliens around the gambling table about his exploits and about his, there's a couple words he tosses around at place locations that are from those books. And so here we go. Once again, we see this collage or this melding of the old canon with the new canon, and somebody someplace is beginning to understand in Disney that you can't divorce the franchise from where it was, and to do so was a mistake and a fallacy. And so they're trying to reintroduce a lot of these places and things, these MacGuffins and people, and we see that just the same as we see the reference to I know her name, but I can't think of the bounty hunter's name, who was in the Clone Wars. who ends up getting killed, supposedly killed by Harrelson's character. Oh, I pushed her off a cliff or something, whatever he said. Anyway, we see these connections. And if you go back to those trio books, Lando's primary companion in those books was a droid. Lando's always, probably as a character, and it makes sense to some degree. There's a couple brief instances where Han Solo and Chewbacca have a droid character as a member of their crew, but not to this degree that Lando does. Lando has always been, like I said, a average pilot at best, and he had to learn at some point, because when he first got the Millennium Falcon, he didn't know how to fly at all. If you go by old legend canon, and it was Sasuri Ruck or whatever, or however that droid's name was produced. Eventually, the droid turned out to be actually a mechanical version of the spacefaring entity race that was in the Alcyon Drift or something like that. The Star Caves of Alcyon or what have you, at which Lando makes a mention of. And the 3 books shows a well-developed character relationship between the two, especially as it grew. And for Lando, being a con artist and a smuggler, a con artist, a smuggler, a confidence man, a trickster, a gambler, what have you, the typical maverick character, and that's something that I never see any connections or references to. But if you remember the old black and white TV series called Maverick, Mel Gibson actually plays the character Maverick in a movie back in the 90s, and I always equated that gambler motif, that gambler personality or class type, as Lando Calrissian fitting smoothly into that category. It would make plenty of sense for him to be more trustworthy of a machine, of a droid, because the droids, even a self-aware droid, is going to be less inclined or less likely to turn on him, to not have his back when he needs it. And he's learned that all organic beings are there to be exploited in some manner. Even his friendships, to some degree, are exploited in how they benefit him. Although he shows points every now and then when he comes around to realizing that that's not necessarily the good way to follow through on something. So as we see at the end of Empire and the beginning of Jedi, the Lando Calrissian character realizes that he's done Han wrong. It didn't pay. He did Han wrong and Leia wrong. He didn't have a lot of choice, grant you, when Darth Vader shows up. You either play ball or you die. I mean, there's not a lot of options there. And that he was unable to successfully retain control of Cloud City, so he wrote it off. And yet he did so in such a manner to warn everybody on board that the Empire was taking over, and get out while the getting was good. And in doing so, created a confusion which aided his associates to escape. And then he tried to make good on his betrayal of Han, which I have mixed figures on how the name's pronounced. I've always called him Han, and Hans also heard it plenty that way, so either way works. But I thought it was awesome. Really good. And lots of potential. And if you get past some of the, I don't know what people are trying to attach to it in the social media, as an enjoyable movie, standalone, great system, great movie, and it gives me hope. I hear rumors that somehow Disney is trying to salvage the trilogy, trying to fix things that they botched in, the last movie. I can't even, it's so uninspiring, I can't even remember the name of the damn thing. That's that, The Last Jedi. There's just so many loopholes in that set of movies so far. I just, starting with, I don't even know where to begin. One of the things that come to mind is this, this reborn rebellion that consists of only a handful of people and a handful of ships and resources that somehow or another Princess Leia had cobbled together, and that she still had support and the Outer Rims, and who is this mysterious support that will come to the aid of what's pretty much not of what's left of the rebellion against the New Order, and the galactic government of the Republic's failure to act on suppressing the New Order from the very get-go. How many times do you have to learn your lessons before they stick? That's my thought on that. And how pathetic, how far they've fallen if the rebellion as we know it become this remnant of a remnant. And then even that's diminished with the loss of Princess Leia. What do you do? But there you have it. My 30 minutes worth of rant and rave. I recommend going and see it. And crossing my fingers for the next one.